Dr. Wasfi, you both have a unique perspective as being both Ashkenazi Jew and Iraqi and American. Tell us, what is that experience like?
I'm all rolled into one. Yeah, my mom's from New York. Her parents were Holocaust survivors who came to the U.S. And my father, originally from Iraq, came to the U.S. to do his studies, and they met in Washington, D.C. That has been something that's been, I've only perceived as a burden up until very recently, that there was quite this split in my family, because there were, with the extended family, there were political differences based on a lack of information, unfortunately. But I think I've been raised with a healthy sense of a need for justice, that wherever there is conflict in the world, there is a wrong that needs to be righted. And that goes from Palestine to Iraq to Afghanistan to Vietnam to Latin America to here at home, where this land was taken from the indigenous peoples. And that, again, the healing needs to begin. Enough of the detriment. And on a basis of the Declaration of Human Rights and respect for international law, we can move forward together.
And would you be good enough to tell us a bit about your life before September 11th?
Sure. Well, I was born in 1971 in New York. My father's originally from Basra, Iraq. My mom's originally from New York, New York. They met when they were students in Washington, D.C. And I spent my early years in Iraq when my dad was working at Basra University, teaching there. We came back in 1977, always intending to go back for a visit, but years of war and occupation followed. Ultimately, 27 years passed, and finally it was the shock and awe invasion of 2003 that was really the probably the last straw, or four of the last straws, to hit me and encourage me to go back and see my family. All of my dad's family is still in Iraq.
And when was the last time you were in Iraq?
I was there January, February, March of 2006.
And you are one of the very few people, most Americans know, American soldiers and some who have family who are contractors there. Most Americans don't know Iraqis who are living in this country, who are living under the occupation. Please tell us, what is that like? What do you hear? Give them a voice.
Well, just anecdotally, it is now summer in the desert, and the temperature is upwards of the upper 40s to 50s centigrade, and which is about 120 to 130 degrees Fahrenheit. In the south, where my family lives, they are on the Shuttle Arab waterway. So when the east winds come, that brings a great deal of humidity with them. And my family doesn't have the electricity to run a ceiling fan, let alone an air conditioner. So for someone like me, that would be extremely frustrating and angering, but I would live through it. For very young, very old, very sick, very poor, very weak, people without access to relief, this becomes a life-threatening situation. And this is now the 5th year they've been living like this. On top of that, and probably the problem foremost in their minds, is the lack of security. And from the lack of security to the lack of health care to the lack of education to declines in electricity and water and just the basic, basic survival of daily life, they are much worse off now than before we invaded.
What was your motivation to go into medicine, and how did you come to that decision?
I was trying to make my parents happy. And that is not a good enough reason to do it. I love them dearly. But it was really, that was kind of the path I decided to take with their encouragement. And it's a lot of time and energy and student loans to take out, that if you don't really love what you're doing, that it takes its toll, and it took its toll on me. I happen to also choose very stressful and competitive fields. Those took more of a toll on me, but ultimately I didn't feel like I had a voice. I started to speak out and challenge the hospital administration, and now I've just rechanneled that anger towards the Bush administration. So
You started off, as you said, without feeling as though you had much of a voice. Many things have changed since September 11th. Among them is your voice. You have clearly become one of the most compelling voices of young people in this country. What is it that you think young people need to know, not only about the occupation, but what American people need to do to end the occupation?
Well, I think there's a great sense of fear and inability to make any change, and I think that's exactly how the powers that be want us to think. You know, it's hard to measure because really the circumstances on the ground in Iraq have only worsened while I've been speaking out. But I think the benefits of what I do might come in the long run if I can get people to take a more humanistic view towards the Iraqi people and Arabs and Muslims in general. No matter what your passion is, no matter where your heart lies, it's important to speak out. We get one shot at this life, and we should do all we can to make a difference for the better. And I believe that when we can put those efforts together, emphasizing what we have in common rather than the differences, which make things interesting, we can work together, and that's what it'll take in this country, mass mobilization and people willing to say, I'm mad as hell and I'm not going to take it anymore.
It seems that according to recent polls, some 84% of the American people agree with you, that we are on the wrong path. It's kind of a bit vague, but they know intuitively that this is not right. Where do you see us going, and are you optimistic about the future for the people of Iraq and the people of America?
Well, I kind of stay naively hopeful about things because it hits so close to home for me. And that's kind of why I do what I do, to try to give people a connection to either the soldiers or Iraqis who are on the ground. And I think that absolutely the occupation will end and the troops will come home. And the question just is not a matter of if, but when. And I hope that it is as soon as possible. Yesterday would be good, in order to, because there will be no healing until the occupation ends. It's as if we've stabbed Iraq in the back, and healing will not take place until we pull the knife out. And that's what our obligation is. Once that happens, we can start to make up for what's been done in our name. And I know that the American people, given the right information and the reality for both the troops coming home and the people of Iraq and Afghanistan and everywhere else we've bombed, that we can make a difference for the better.
And in closing this chapter, tell us, what is your future? How do you see yourself resuming your practice of medicine? And how do you see yourself living your life here or in Iraq?
That's a really good question. Ideally, I would love to be able to visit my family once a year or once every 2 years, just to maintain the connections. I have little cousins now that are changing every minute, so I'd like to stay in touch with them. Clinical medicine I probably won't go back to, and that could be another whole interview on the American medical system and the training.
Yes.
But I will see. Perhaps I can combine these areas. What I hope to do is set up a project like Adopt a Hospital to try to build bridges rather than drop the bombs that destroy them. And then maybe that can be something to build on for the future, again, to make up for what's been done in our name.
Dr. Dahlia Wasfi, you are a special human being. Thank you for your service to humanity.
It's my pleasure to be here. Thank you so much.
Thank you.